super excited today because we have some very special people here. So I'm going to talk about Peter first. Peter, just wave. Everybody can see you. Um,
I
and really super excited to have you here. This is how I see you. One of the most loved crime authors in the world, with over 21 million copies sold. I'll just repeat that, 21 million. So congratulations on that. 19 consecutive Sunday Times #1. I mean, really, that's fantastic. He's an icon. And part of what, it's just us thinking, but the magic of Peter's storytelling is not just in his gripping plots and his unforgettable characters, but also in the profound authenticity that runs through the books. And part of this is from working with Graham Bartlett, who's also here today. Graham, wave so everybody can see you. Graham is police procedural guru with over 30 years of real life cop experience. And so this dynamic duo really brings the intricacy of crime investigation to life on the pages of both their books. Both of them are authors. I have, and Peter, you're going to laugh. So in Canada, we are way behind you. So your book, Picture You Dead, came out just a couple of weeks ago in Canada and arrived on my doorstep yesterday. So for everyone here, this is available everywhere in the world now, online, including Canada. So we're excited about that. So please, if you haven't read it, go out and get it. And I want to give a shout out to this book, which is Left You Dead. And this is a book, Peter, that we use in our teachings, in our classes for Fictionary. And we use it to show really how you show using a blurb to give a knowledge gap in the first chapter of a book to really create tension where the reader knows something that the main character doesn't know. And it's really exciting because the reader knows that the main character, his wife gets out of the car and doesn't come back, but he doesn't know it. And so the whole scene is just this little description of them having a little argument, and off she goes, and you think, oh, okay, but she's not coming back. So it's a really, really great example of how to write an opening scene and combine it with your blurb. So with all that excitement, clearly I'm excited you're here. I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter, and to Graham. And Graham, if you can just, you've got your book there. I don't have it. So please hold it up so everybody can see your latest book coming out, and just give a little shout out to what it is.
Okay, so this is Force of Hate. It's the second in. I haven't got anywhere near Peter's achievements yet, but I'm on his tail somewhere in the distance. But this is the second in my Joe Howe series, also based in Brighton, and this is out in paperback in the UK tomorrow. The first one is out already, Bad for Good. And basically, it's Joe Howe is the police commander of Brighton and Hove, which was a job I used to do. And she is faced with huge political and social pressures to deliver a safe city, which she doesn't do very well, because in the first book, it's all about what happens when cuts are so bad that vigilantism takes over. And she has to deal with that while also investigating the murder of her predecessor's son. That's Bad for Good. And the second book, which is the one that's out tomorrow in paperback, is Force of Hate. And that's all about what happens when a neo-Nazi council takes over the city of Brighton and Hove and uses slaves, human trafficking victims, and euthanasia to plot a major terrorist atrocity. So if you're coming to Brighton and Hove, it's all fiction, isn't it, Peter? We don't, this is not really like that in Brighton and Hove.
It's a war zone. It's a war zone. I did once have a Dutch fan wrote to me, said, dear Mr. James, my boyfriend and I are coming to Brighton in a few weeks' time, but we have been reading your books and we are a little bit worried. So I wrote and I said, listen, you'll be safe. I'll make sure that Roy Grace takes care of you. And 6 months later, I had a really sweet email from her. She said, well, my boyfriend and I did go to Brighton, and you know what? We didn't get mugged.
But I call that a success, having been in charge of police.
This was while you were commander, Graham. So I think
was it? Oh, thank goodness for that. I'll chalk that one up.
You kept the streets safe.
for that one person. Yeah.
I have to tell you a quick story. When Graham was commander, my Roy Grace is based on a former detective superintendent called Dave Gaylor, and we still work kind of very closely together. But when Dave retired from the police, Graham very kindly kind of took over as my live contact point on the police, and we've stayed great mates ever since. And Graham also helps me with the books. But I remember when he was commander, and I needed somewhere to put a body into the harbour and also to deposit a van. And so Graham came with me in my car in uniform about 1 o'clock one morning, driving around all the back streets around the local harbour. He was saying, this would be a good place here, you know, and we could probably leave the van there.
I mean, I was on duty, wasn't I, Peter? And if anyone had asked me, luckily I was the boss, so no one was likely to. But if anyone asked me what you were doing, I'd say, well, I'm just trying to find somewhere to dump a body. What else would you be doing at 1 o'clock in the morning with the world's greatest crime writer? You know, it's just normal things to do. But that, I mean, that's a really good example of Peter's absolute dedication to research and to authenticity, because we spent hours on that evening, didn't we, Peter, just driving around looking for the right place. There were some other scenes that you wanted to check out as well, and would this work in the, and we I remember we were in and out of the car all the time, and there was one part of that evening. There was this was for Dead Man's Grip, and there's a scene in there where there's a body in the back of a car, in the boot of a car, in an underground car park. So we went into that car park. I don't know if you remember this, Pete. We went into the car park, and you said, right, okay, get out of the car. And I felt a bit intimidated, obviously, but I got out of the car as I was told. And Peter pointed to a car in the corner and said, okay, there's a body in that car. Imagine there's a body in that car. Now, tell me everything that you're thinking and going to do as the first officer on the scene, and two, the senior investigating officer. Just put yourself in the moment and talk me through that. And I think we must have spent about half an hour talking about what I would do to protect the scene, how I would close off stairwells, and I don't know if you remember, Peter, there's a Regency Square car park, and what would do around CCTV, and it was, you know, Peter actually made me go into senior investigating officer mode to do that, and then you read the way that Peter then writes that in the book, and you don't get half an hour of procedure in there. You just get the bits that you need to really make that scene leap off the page. Nothing more, nothing less. And it's a really clever way of using very, very deep research. But that's what you do, isn't it, Pete? That's what you do all your research that way.
Yeah, I think I know your books drip with authenticity as well. I think people who read, the fact that you're reading are smart, you're intelligent by the fact you're just actually reading books in today's world where it's so easy to do anything but read books. And I think people who read, I certainly base it on my own experience. When I read a novel, I don't just want a great page-turning experience of a storyline. I also want to learn something about the world, something about the author's experience, something about whatever subject I'm reading about. If it's police, I want to know a bit more about how the police think about their world. What impact does being a police officer have? And I mean, I remember talking to Graham about this. I said, are you the same person after 30 years in the police as you were before you went into it? And I don't think you are.
Yeah, I mean, certainly not. I mean, you know, what one is more grey hair, but no, it does you know, it does affect you. You know, you don't kind of wear that the whole time. You don't walk around kind of with a bottle of whiskey in your pocket to swig from, you know, because you're so traumatized. But it does take chips away at you. You know, it takes chunks out of you, and certain things will affect you that you're not expecting. I was at an event at a festival. So some people here might have been there, Bloody Scotland, a big crime festival at the weekend, and it was interesting. There was another author, ex-police officer called Neil Lancaster, and his Achilles heel is exactly the same as my Achilles heel. We never discussed this. I know Neil well, but we never discussed this, and it's around cot death, baby deaths, and it was the thing that, you know, obviously it's trauma. It's always going to be traumatic, but it's the you know, one incident with Neil and one incident with me sticks with you, and it's, you know, Peter gets that out. Peter's really clever in you know, Roy Grace isn't the same person. What is it, 20 novels ago? Is it 20, Peter? This next one coming out next week?
19. I'm writing the 20th.
19. Right, yeah. So Roy Grace isn't the same, but he's been through all sorts of traumas and all sorts of life experiences. So he's not the same person, and you wouldn't expect him to be. You know, you don't kind of at the end of a book, you know, hose yourself down and start afresh. And I think you're really, because you know so many police officers, Peter. I think that really comes through strongly with your not just Roy, but Glenn Branson and the others too. They've all had something taken away from them by the job, as well as, you know, something added to them.
Yeah, I really see it. I mean, I think there's a great quote by one of the former commanders of the Met who said, "Wearing a uniform does not protect you from trauma."
Mm.
And I think that's so true. People think that police officers are superhuman. I remember when you came to dinner parties years back, and my ex Helen would say, "He's such a nice guy. Can he really be that tough when Graham goes? Can Graham really be that tough? How can he be that tough? He's just gentle and sweet." And I said, "I've been out with him when I've seen him go operational, and he changes from being this nice, sweet guy we're looking at right now on our screens to this absolutely almost SAS focused, cold, tough guy. It's an extraordinary. You're not schizophrenic, but if I didn't know you, I'd think you were."
And sometimes you have to turn things on and off, don't you? And I mean, I remember my predecessor, my predecessor, but one, and I won't say his name, but Peter will know who I'm talking about. He used to shout at people and bellow at them, and, you know, and everyone just used to duck their shoulders, and it used to go over their heads. And then an inspector came up to me a little while later. I was working on the division at the time, and said, "Oh, you're much scarier than this other person." I said, "How much scarier? I never lose my temper. I don't shout." She said, "Oh no, but you've got a look." She said, "You've got a look. We know if you're angry, you've got the look." So I think that must be what Peter's referring to then. But, you know, I'm a happy, jolly person, really, aren't I, Peter?
You are, yes.
That's
No,
sounding a bit
I think
false.
you have that great balance, but I think, and you've kind of kept your warmth. But there is, you know, I think I remember I met Andy McNabb not that long ago, and he's got like he's a nice guy, but there's a real cold edge. And I heard a story of him when he was in a pub in Somerset, um, and he was with his wife and two friends, and it was the friend who told me this story. And it was lunchtime, and there was a football game going on, and there were four of the worst kind of Brits you never want to meet. They were all wearing wife beaters, tattooed, shaven heads, drunk, and shouting at the screen, and, you know, constant profanities. And Andy McNabb, apparently, just got up, walked over to them, and said, "Gentlemen, would you please just dial it down? We have ladies with us." And one of them got up and squared off at him and said, "Yeah, you want to fight?" And he said, "No, I don't want to fight. I'm giving you two choices. You either leave right now, or all four of you will be in hospital for a very long time." And they walked out. That is kind of what I've seen you have when you're in that mode, that you could do that.
I'm not sure I could put four people in hospital, but it's that kind of, it's not being angry, it's not being, you know, it's not kind of squaring up to people. It's just, yeah, it's. I mean, I joined the police when I was 18, and I knew probably within about 4 weeks that I was never going to fight my way out of problems. I was like 10 stone, sort of weedy, and looked very, very young. So I knew I had to talk my way out of problems, and I kind of developed that over the years. And so many other people, you know, so many of my colleagues are like that as well, because you don't really want conflict at all. You know, you'd rather turn it down, but you you know, in that sort of Andy McNabb, the ex-SAS example there, you do have to, sometimes you do have to follow it through. You know, if it doesn't work, you do have to follow it through. Yeah, it's and I think, you know, when I'm sort of advising other authors, I'm always sort of talking about, you know, just be more measured with your officers. Don't have them kind of shouting and fighting. You know, it's much more interesting to have them like Roy Grace, who kind of gets what he wants by argument and force of nature, not force of nature, force of personality, and you know, and just just being able to schmooze his way through. Because he, you know, Roy's an ex-rugby player, isn't he? But he's not a. If you look at John Sim as a, you know, who plays Roy in the ITV Grace series, he's not a big sort of busking bloke, because he's, you know, he's just a normal size, but he's got a very, very politely forceful way about him.
Yeah, he brings that over brilliantly on television.
But I mean, you use other advisors as well, don't you, Peter? I mean, your book that's out in the UK tomorrow, Stop Them Dead. You work very closely with the RSPCA on that, haven't you? I saw you talking at the Capital Crime Festival a couple of weeks ago about that.
Yeah, I always think it's important for me to speak to the experts in any kind of field that I'm writing about. And I love learning stuff. You know, writing a Roy Grace novel is basically going to be a year of my life. So that sort of, when I'm starting out a new book, there's two things that are really important to me. One is, am I going to enjoy writing this? You know, is it going to be something that's going to engage me, and am I going to learn something through writing it? And those are my kind of two prime criteria when I'm deciding what I'm going to write next. And with Stop Them Dead, which is just coming out, I'm a passionate dog lover and animal lover in general, as is my wife. And Stop Them Dead gave me an opportunity to really immerse myself in a side of animal care, dog welfare that I'd never seen before. The sort of the police rural crime team, the huge illegal trade in dogs that exploded during lockdown. And just as a caveat, I always say this, as a dog lover, I have not depicted any dog being harmed. It's not something I could write. I learned very long time ago, back in the early 90s, and one of my earliest book, never harm an animal. You can do what you want to a baby. You know, you can dismember a baby, you can barbecue it. People will be happy with that. But you hurt any animal, and your readers will never forgive you.
That's so true. I mean, I was watching a drama the other night, which was called The Tower, something in the UK, which is written by another. We're not all over the place. Another ex-police officer, or the book was called Kate London, and it's a brilliant drama. If you get a chance to watch it, it's brilliant. But an animal is apparently harmed in that, and it. I mean, she's someone I know, so I wrote to her and just said, "Loved The Tower, but can you just leave the animals alone next time?" The body count of human, just pile them on, but never the animals.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what I mean, in Stop Them Dead, what really I learned, and I still learn stuff around crime and policing, is the role of organized crime in puppy farming, and and how it's it's part of organized criminality now. And if we think of organized criminality as just being business on the wrong side of the law, then anything that's going to earn a buck, organized criminals are going to get into. And I mean, I've had the pleasure of reading Peter's books, months before they come out, because I'd obviously provide sort of whatever guidance I can on the bits that I think need it. But when I read it, it was that was an eye opener to me, because I hadn't been in the police for a few years now. But it is all about commodity, and all about and it's using, you said a minute ago, Peter, that you like to, people like to read to learn things. It's using fiction to educate, and I think the education that the public will get from Stop Them Dead around, internet adverts for puppies, and just just very, very dubious arrangements to sell very high value dogs at prices that you wouldn't expect to pay, is probably backed by organized crime. Are you right in thinking that, Peter?
Completely. I was astonished because what sort of sparked my interest was I read an article in the Brighton newspaper, the Argus, about 2.5 years ago, and a woman had been mugged for her Springer Spaniel. This is just at the peak of COVID, and it was a breeding bitch, and it said the dog was worth £5,000. And I thought two things. One is, it's bad enough if you're being robbed, but if it's your watch that's taken, if you've got a Rolex or something like that, okay, it's not very nice, but you can get insurance. If it's your dog, which is something that you have looked after from a puppy, it's part of your family. I couldn't imagine how heartbreaking that would be if that had happened to me or to my wife. And I happened to have a meeting with Jo Shiner, the Chief Constable of Sussex, just after that. And she said to me, we have an epidemic of dog crime throughout the UK that's been prompted by the explosion of people wanting lockdown dogs. And the people who've jumped on this bandwagon are organized crime. I mean, even now, and the RSPCA told me this only a few months ago, if you wanted a particular shade of breeding bitch, blue French bulldog, they're the ones that a lot of A-list celebs want. They're the fashion accessory, £100,000, and one of its puppies 25,000. That's an awful lot of money walking around on the end of a lead if you're out in a park somewhere. And the organized crime gangs know this, and they know also they get caught. They're looking for puppy smuggling, illegal dog breeding. They're looking at sentences, probably giving a maximum of 6 months if they're really unlucky. Whereas with drugs, they're looking 5 to 15 years plus. So it's become a no-brainer for the organized crime gangs throughout the UK, and I think throughout parts of the Western world.
And it's the way you depict it in there about how the puppies are stolen and how the puppies are sold. It's just I mean, I remember after I read it, which was must have been about a year ago. I probably read the first draft of it. I was like, say with any of Peter's books, you just you spend your life looking around for the clues. Then after you've read them, so I was looking around for people around the dog. I've got a dog, and around where I walk the dog, and no one's going to steal my dog to give it back. He's such a pickle. But I just find myself looking around all the time, and I think it's a real service. I remember when I was in the police, I think it was actually at the launch of Dead Man's Grip, which was at Shoreham Harbour. The journalists, I was still in the police then, as Peter said, and journalists came up to me, and I was interviewed about why I support Peter's books, why Sussex Police supports Peter's research. And it was, I said, so many people get information about life and about the police, particularly from fiction. So the more we can do to help crime writers and TV makers write authentic fiction, where the police are shown not in a rosy light, but in a fair light, then it makes my job as the police commander for big and vibrant city that much easier, because the characters in Peter's book are absolutely as they would be. Roy Grace is as he would be, and so if the public are thinking, as Peter said to the Dutch couple, I'll get Roy Grace to look after you. If people are thinking they're going to come to Brighton and get somebody like Roy Grace in charge, or somebody like Norman Potting, who's turning out to investigate their crime, a bit raggedy on the edges, but knows what he's doing, they're not far wrong, because that's and I think that was the service that I saw Peter giving back to us as the police, from us giving Peter access to appropriate parts of our lives. And Peter's a great networker, and you've managed to sustain it over the years, haven't you? So there's lots of lots of people that have moved on, and because Peter's such a loyal and just trying to think of the right word, but just a loyal friend and faithful to that relationship. You know, chief officers and city commanders like I was over the years have been have embraced Peter and his methods and been keen to be involved.
Thank you, Graham. I think it's because I've always tried to be fair. I do show the police warts and all, but in general, I show how tough it is to be a police officer, and that whilst there's always bad press about a few rotten eggs, the vast majority of police officers aren't highly paid. Not many jobs where you leave home in the morning and your partner doesn't know if you're going to come back with your face intact or come back at all that night. The vast majority do a terrific and selfless job. And I'm being asked often well, how did you get this relationship with the police? Or my own personal relationship was I got burgled. And a young detective came to take fingerprints back in 1981. I just had my first book published, which was a not great spy thriller called Dead Letter Drop. I'm giving you the title so you don't buy it. And he saw a guy called Mike Harris, and he saw the book. He said, if you ever want help with the police, give me a call. And he was married to a detective, and my then wife and I became friends with them. And they invited us to barbecue at the house one day, and there was a dozen of their friends, all police officers. There was homicide, response, SOCO, traffic. And I just thought, wow, these people, nobody sees more of human life in a 30-year career than a police officer. And that was how my interest. And when they realized I was genuinely interested, they started giving me time and got to a point where they phoned me up and said, we're doing a raid tomorrow. Do you want to ride along with us? And I think that anyone who wants to learn more about the police, I'm a great believer in 6 degrees of separation. Every one of us will know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows a police officer. And if you can get to that police officer, you start it from there. And as Graham said, it's all about relationship building and trust building. And also, Graham, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. I think that in my observations, there's a constant game of catch up between police and criminals. The criminals get the edge, police catch up, get the edge, criminals get it back. It's like a constant game. Would you agree with that?
No, absolutely. We're constantly, as you say, a couple of paces behind. I think if you look at the lifestyle of a criminal and the lifestyle of the police, the criminal has all the time in the world or criminal community has all the time in the world to find pinch points, weak points in procedures, in technology, in forensics, and then exploit them. And the police are so kind of busy, sort of dealing with today's issues or yesterday's issues, that they kind of see this new threat and have to respond to it. Whereas, and sometimes by the time they've responded to it, organized crime's moved on, and they like puppy farming. They moved on to that kind of thing. So it is a constant game of catch up. I can't remember, certainly in my career, when I felt we were really on the front foot and we were really ahead of them. I mean, Peter and I, I met a passport forger which is the kind of the backstory to Picture You Dead, really. But I met a passport forger when I burst into his house with a number of other officers, and we found him screen printing passports for the Hong Kong community when Hong Kong was going to be handed back to China. And nobody had thought really that there was this big industry going on. It wasn't really a big industry; it was a cottage industry. But he was due to make tens of thousands of pounds out of selling these passports at £1,000 each. We were playing catch up on that, and you know, we caught him because some intelligence came in, and we caught him. They were actually in process of printing, and the one of the chief immigration officers at Gatwick Airport said that these passports at the time were the best forgeries they'd ever seen, except for two issues. Well, one issue which came up twice, which was they couldn't spell. So on the page where it said her Britannic and Majesty was spelled incorrectly. So they printed all these passports, but they were still selling them for £1,000 a throw. But we were behind that. We were behind that, and the kind of the upshot of that was that years later, Peter and I were writing a non-fiction called Death Comes Knocking, Police and Roy Grace's Brighton. I'm going to do a big plug here, which is the stories behind the Roy Grace novels. And I took Peter to meet this chap, David Henty, the one who we'd arrested. And he welcomed me like an old friend, didn't he, Peter? And we sat and had lunch with him. Got one of his co-defendants.
Mate, great to see you. How you doing?
It was like that. We're really good friends today. In fact, I don't know. He's in the Times today. I don't know. Do you WhatsApp you, Peter, with that? He's been a picture of him clipping the Times. And then he got his co-defendant from all those years ago was back in prison to phone me from prison. We spoke to him Peter and I spoke to him on the phone, and he now forges paintings for a living, legitimately. But he makes us say that we're contractually obliged to say legitimately. That was so he creates these masterpieces and signs them in his own name, and that was the inspiration behind the book that you held up there, Christina, which was Picture Them Dead. So because you worked closely with him after that, didn't you, Peter, and learned a lot about the art forgery.
Yeah, he's a massive. He learned to paint in prison. While he was in prison for forging passports, and he discovered he had a real talent for copying Picasso, Modigliani, Lowry, and old masters. And he did a deal with one of the prison warders who was flogging his pictures for eBay for £1,000 a piece, and they were splitting the money while he was in prison.
If you ever Google David Henty, or Google David Henty and Peter James together, and you'll see how this relationship has flourished. Including judging a TV competition, didn't you, Peter, that he was involved in?
Yeah, well, firstly, what happened was when you and I met him, he said, "Oh, I'm having my first art exhibition." He said, "I've discovered that if I actually put my name somewhere on a picture, I can't be done for forgery." And he's got a celebrity clientele. He's got some big names buy his art, and he's selling his art, his copies of Lowry and whatever for £5,000 to £40,000. So it's not. And the quality is stunning. And anyway, he said, "I'm having this art exhibition. Would you do me the honor of opening it?" So I went along with my wife, and he had Van Goghs, he had, you name it, it was there. And he sold out. And he was so happy, he gave my wife and I a Lowry as a thank you. And we hung it at home. By sheer chance, about a month later, we had a dinner party, and this character called Tim Wonnacott, who used to be director of Sotheby's, and he hosted a television show called Cash in the Attic, or Bargain Hunt. And he was also an Antiques Roadshow, the fine arts guy. And he said, "Well, that's a lovely Lowry." I said, "Do you think it's genuine, Tim?" And he took it off the wall. He spent 3 or 4 minutes examining it. So I'm not seeing anything here to tell me this is a forgery. And that gave me an idea. And I rang Dave Henty and I said, I've always loved a French painter from the 1700s called Fragonard. I said, "Could you paint a Fragonard so well that even the world's #1 authority on Fragonard could not tell it was a forgery?" And he said, "Absolutely." And he told me how to do it. And that actually became the basis of Picture You Dead, which came out last year, but you kindly held up. And he's just one of these larger-than-life, cheeky chappies. He's got a massive talent. You know, I think if he'd grown up in maybe in a different environment, I think he grew up in a bit of a crime family. If he'd grown up in a different environment, he probably be a massively successful painter in his own right today. But I think he's very happy doing his forgeries. I mean, with
sorry, go on. all I was going to say is I was just going to get a flippant comment, bearing in mind that I started him on his career because I was the one that put him in prison. Maybe I should be going to him for royalties for all of his sales. I've not thought of that until just a second ago. I'll send him a message in a minute and open the discussion.
Yeah, but I think you could argue by kicking in his front door and arresting him and all his team, you ruined his life, but you could equally argue that he made his career.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to get my agent onto his and see what we can work out.
I think you should have it on your books. Get busted by me, and your career
Yeah.
will be on.
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay,
But
that was super interesting. We're past the half hour, so very generous of you to, um, give us so much insight into how you're doing all of this. And I'm hoping we could have a few minutes just for questions. Is that okay, Peter?
Absolutely. Can I just quickly say, whereabouts are you in Canada?
I live just north of Kingston, Ontario, so I'm between Toronto and Montreal along the Lake Ontario range.
Because I lived in Toronto in the early 1970s, and my first writing break was writing Polka Dot Door.
Wow. So Canadians like to actually say you're Canadian, just so you know. We pretend, oh, he's Canadian. He just lives over in Britain. But he's really a Canadian author. It's kind of funny that. And I actually thought for a while you were Canadian. I was corrected on that. So, there we are. And that's only because I guess you live in
I'm an almost Canadian. I'm a honorary Canadian, am I? Maybe.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And as you can see, we're just late on our book delivery here, but other than that, Canada's fantastic. So our first question is from Lisa. Do you get your advising from experts before you start writing or during the outlining phase or later? What happens in your process?
Who's the question to?
It's to you, Peter.
Probably you, yeah.
It sort of, I do it in fits and starts. The idea for the book comes from wherever it comes from. And I basically then try to learn as much about the topic. So with Stop Them Dead, from the moment I read about this woman being mugged for her dog in the park, and then I had the meeting with the chief constable, who said that she would give me a lot of support if I was to write about this topic. And I then met the head of rural crime for Sussex, an officer called Tom Carter, who was phenomenally helpful. He told me how villains who steal dogs, most people in England now who've got a dog have it chipped. He said the villains just put another chip on top. And if you take it to the vet, it's the top one that will be red. And he was then telling me how some of the clever tricks that the criminals use. For instance, let's say you want to buy a puppy, and you go on one of the websites like Gumtree or eBay or all the places where puppies are advertised. You see that little golden retriever puppy that your heart soars in, and you get an address and you go and it's a really nice house. And you think, oh, these are nice people. It's a beautiful house, lovely garden. You're so busy looking at this dog that you forget to ask fundamental questions like, where's the mother? And you don't notice that there are actually no family photos anywhere on the walls. And ordinarily, if you're going to buy a puppy, you would go look at it at 3-4 weeks, select it, and then you come back after it's had its injections 8-10 weeks. But that day they'll say, oh no, we've got a line of people, it's cash now, £3,500, or I'm afraid we're sending it to somebody else. And you've now fallen in love, your child you've taken to fall in love with it, and you take it away, and a week later it gets really sick, and you phone the people up. It was an Airbnb. They'd rented it for a week and they vanished.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the kind of big tricks that the criminals use.
So I have to say that's really going to influence my life. I volunteer and raise guide dogs puppies, so I always have a guide dog for Canadian Guide Dogs for the Blind with me all the time, and I never leave them anywhere. I don't leave them in the car and stuff. But now I'm just thinking I'm going to be holding on just a tad bit tighter because, of course, they're highly trained, really valuable dogs that are come from long lines of really healthy, well-bred, there's high qualities you can get in a dog. So I just think I'm gonna hang on a little tighter.
What a
My
great thing you do. What a great thing you
Oh,
do.
yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. So I think, Graham, this question is for you. I have a question about police procedure in the UK. In Canada, specifically in my municipal police service, any new procedure is posted as a general and or routine order, then put into the procedure manual. How did the new procedures get in the UK?
So it's quite similar. I mean, it's all electronic. So if a new law comes in or a new policy that's going to require operation officers to do something differently, that's circulated it's called different things in different forces, but in Sussex, which is the force that I was from and that Peter and I both write in, it's circulated in something called routine orders. So it's a weekly kind of digest really of new changes that have come in, and then various kind of online manuals are changed and obviously tracked as well, so you can make sure you've got the current version, and that's how that happens. And quite often, particularly sort of around the end of a parliament, there's quite a lot of criminal. You get quite a lot of criminal justice laws that change because they're quite good vote winners. So that tends to become sort of fairly heavy duty in the last year of the UK Parliament as laws change, but also as procedures change, and that all comes through. That it's a lot to take in. I mean, the officers, bearing in mind the uniform officers, the frontline officers, they won't know, whereas it's 5:45 in the UK now, they wouldn't know at 6 o'clock what they're going to be at. They've got to hold a lot of this in their head as well.
Nice. Thank you for that. Okay, so this question is from Laura. Are there any problems with mentioning real street names, buildings, and villages in fiction, which might put them in a bad light, especially in crime?
The answer is not really. I mean, I think you just got to be careful as a writer. There's certain institutions can't sue, which is interesting. I think hospitals can't sue for some reason for libel. But I use real names except where I've got a murder scene, and then I'll slightly adjust it. So if it's a street, I'll call it an avenue. I'll just tweak it a little bit. I mean, I remember somebody writing to me very indignantly saying, "Why did you have a woman raped and murdered in my daughter's apartment?" She said, "I've identified it from what you described." But in general, you can, as long as you're not slandering somebody, you can be free to. I prefer to use real places, and I'm sure from having read Graham's books, I know he does too, because crime, I think the nature of crime is very particular to local place. I think Michael Connelly's Los Angeles, Ed McBain's precincts in New York, Ian Rankin's Edinburgh. Different places have different crime, and so I think the books have much more strength if you are actually using a real place rather than a fictional place.
Right, which is probably why
Yeah,
people can
I
really
agree.
visualize it when you're writing about it.
I remember Peter once asking me to check a road and tell him what number the road the houses go up to, because he wanted something on that road but not in the house. And I think you then moved it like 20 houses up from what it really would be for that very reason. I've got to say, Penny, your dog is absolutely adorable. I keep getting glimpses of your dog on screen here, and it's absolutely adorable. So hold on to that one very, very tight when you're out.
Okay, so here's a question for both of you. How did you find each other, and decide to work together? And what does that collaboration look like?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember. Well, I I met Graham obviously when he was commander of Brighton and Hove Police, and he was very generous to me. But then he said to me one day, he said, when I retire from the police, And in England, people retire from the police very young. I mean, Graham retired at 29, 49, I think, was it? Wasn't it?
Yeah, 48, yeah, 48.
48. And he said, I'd really like to write. And I groaned, because probably once a month I get a cop somewhere in England or the world writes to me, says, I've just written a book. Would you mind taking a look at it? And I know how it's going to start. It was like, I was walking in a westerly direction when I happened to notice a rather villainous looking person. You know, they write in this plod speak, very much the way they write statements, which is not how we write fiction. And I said to Graham, have you written anything? And he said, yeah, I've written a few essays. And I said, well, ping them over. And I was blown away. I thought, wow, Graham can really write. He's got a real, not just a lightness of touch. He's actually, I find it's very difficult to teach creative writing. There's certain things you can teach people. You can enhance somebody who's got talent, but if somebody's got no essential talent, it's very difficult to actually, how much you coax them to look at them in the eye and say, one day you're going to be a successful published author, that you either got it or you haven't. And with Graham, I just instantly felt this guy's got something.
Nice.
He could actually do it.
Nice. So Graham, what, just to follow up on that question, what, you've got 2 books out. What was the trigger to write book 1?
Well, I've including the books I've written with Peter. I've actually got 4 books out. So
Oh,
Peter and I've written 2 non-fictions. Yeah. So Death Comes Knocking, which was Peter's, following on from Peter's very kind comments there, he then suggested that we write a non-fiction basically telling the story around Brighton and Hove and the stories that influenced and are similar to the Roy Grace novels. So we brought that one out, and that was kind of my apprenticeship, really, or the start of my apprenticeship, because Peter was very, very generous in his, well, he would be, because his name was going to be on the cover, so it had to be good. So very generous in terms of coaching my writing. So, you know, I might have had the bones of it there, but it certainly wasn't polished. And so we brought that one out in 2016, and then another one in 2020. But you know, I'd always, once I'd got the bug of writing, I'd had this yearning to write fiction, and thought, well, actually, nobody's writing crime fiction from the perspective of the job that I used to do. And quite often, this isn't the case in Peter's books, but quite often you see very senior officers painted as quite selfish, career-driven, almost antagonists, really, to the protagonist. And it's not the case. I mean, you know, I spent my life as a divisional commander being a real champion for the operational officers, trying to get them extra resources and funding, you know, trying to sort of be the shield between them and all of the political nonsense that was affecting me, so that they could just get on with their job. And it was all around the time that the cuts were coming in. So I thought, well, actually, you know, the cuts were really having an impact on policing. So I just thought, you know what, I could write a story about what happens when it gets so bad that vigilantism takes over. And that was the germ of the idea. But then I learned very much that writing fiction was very different from writing non-fiction. Same kind of, you know, still need a lightness of touch and need to be able to storytell and all those sorts of things. So Peter was very generous in going through some early drafts of early chapters of that. And you know, somebody asked me the other day, what book would you like to be buried with? And I think it's without doubt the first draft of Bad for Good, because I don't want anyone to read it ever, because it's it was such a novice attempt. But you know, Peter helped me kind of polish that, and now I've kind of got a style. But Peter still reads all my books before they go to my agent, you know, and gives me guidance on them. So we have a sort of quid pro quo arrangement, don't we, Peter? In that regard.
I owe you a debt for life from all the help you gave me. It's a joy to read the books as well.
It's very kind of you. I enjoy writing them, and it gives me a confidence for Peter, because he doesn't come back and say, "Oh, that's great." You know, he'll come back with genuine feedback, and it's really it's a privilege to have that.
Yep. Absolutely. And your comment about coffin leads right into what Lisa Lepke would like to know. Apparently, she's heard you, Peter, tell a story about a coffin at some point, and she'd like you to share that with everybody.
Well, it's my first Roy Grace novel, Dead Simple, and the book begins with do you call them a bachelor party?
Yep.
Stag night? Bachelor party prank, and they want to pay this guy back for all the pranks he's played on them. And they come up with this idea they're going to bury him alive in a coffin for 2 hours in a grave they've dug in advance in a remote woodlands. They go on a pub crawl with him, get him drunk, put him in the coffin, and they're going to put the lid on, cover it all up. They leave him with a walkie-talkie and a bottle of whiskey, and they're going to go off for 2 hours. They're going to come back, dig him up. And they drive off, and they all get wiped out in a car wreck. And he's left in the coffin. That's end of chapter 1.
Oh, and that's a hook.
That's Dead Simple. And being me, I wanted to know what's it like to be in a coffin. And so I asked a firm of funeral directors that I knew if they would put me in a coffin for half an hour, screw the lid down, and leave me. And I'm intensely claustrophobic. I don't even like to sit in the back of a two-door car. And anyway, I rocked up at this. It was a family farm, and I remember this, but it was about 10:30 in the morning. And everybody had gone off to funerals and to collect bodies and what have you. And they'd left this elderly granddad. He was about 90 in charge. He said, "Oh, yes, I forgot you were coming. I'm going to put you in the coffin, aren't I?" And I said, "Yes." And it's not that easy to get in the coffin, funnily enough. And it's much narrower. I figured sort of it would be like lying on the floor of an elevator, but it's actually, and he said, "You really wanted to put the lid down?" And I said, "Mm-hmm." And he puts the lid down, and suddenly it's really dark. And I told them to screw it down so I couldn't get out. I wanted to feel that sense of being trapped. And I heard these screws go, and then my first thought is, what if there's a spider in here? I'd spoken to a funeral, a coroner, the coroner for Sussex, and I said, "How long do you have in a coffin? How much air would you have?" And she said, "Well, if it's well made, you'd probably have 3 to 4 hours. But if you hyperventilate, you could knock that down to 40 minutes easily and less." So then I'm thinking, shit, I think, what if he goes out to get a coffee and falls over or drops dead and nobody comes back for 2 hours? Honestly, it was the longest and worst half hour of my life, but it did help me to describe it. And I remember when the book came out, I was on book tour in New Zealand, and I did a signing in a bookstore in Hamilton. And this, about 2 days later, the bookstore owner messaged me. She said, one of the ladies who signed a book for us just come back, and she said she can't read on unless I can tell her that he gets out the coffin at the end.
That's a fantastic story and super brave of you, and really, really shows how serious you are about your research. Wow, I gotta say, I don't know that I would do that.
I think it's crazy. I think it's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I might have put someone who I know genuinely loves me standing outside of that coffin and said, "Don't leave right there. You must stay." I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I could do it. Alrighty, we're gonna go with one more question. I think this one is for you, Graham. It's from Randy, and he says, and I'm wondering if Randy's a police officer, but he says, do police officers in the UK have discretion? It's part of the criminal code in Canada, except in cases of domestic assault where you have to arrest people.
Yeah, pretty much. So, I mean, it certainly domestic assault. There, my son's actually is a response officer, so he kind of keeps me up to date on these sort of things. If you don't arrest for domestic assault, you have to get permission not to arrest from a more senior officer. And you know, there are obvious things like murder and stuff like that you'd arrest for, but providing you can justify your non-arrest, then you know that's fine. And in fact, the law in the UK is you don't need arrest warrants in the UK. The law's kind of enshrined in the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, but you also have to sort of show the opposite, that you have to show that the arrest was necessary. So if you've got somebody who's committed a minor offence, and you can find a, you can, maybe you can deal with them in a different way. You maybe interview them without arresting them, or even give them a warning. Then you should do that. So yeah, discretion's very much right. And I think it's something that officers would jealously guard as well, because there's a lot of criticism of officers and a lot of power put on them, and a lot of criticism when when that power's thought to be abused. So forcing them to do certain things would be the wrong thing. So yeah, it's very, very much part of the DNA of a police officer to exercise discretion.
Nice. Thank you for that. Randy says thank you. All right, I'm going to end it with one final question, Peter, for you. You are coming out with book 19, or book 19 is coming out and you're writing book 20, is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So at what point from book number 1 forward did you really know, okay, this is now a lifetime passion. It's an incredible achievement to have that many successful books, book after book. So where was the moment that you went, I have something?
It's a really great question. I mean, I'd always sort of just written standalones before that, and my publishers asked if I had ever thought of creating a detective as a central character, and they gave me a 2-book deal, and it was Roy Grace had. So I was trying to think with Roy Grace, what do I do that's different? How can I make him different? And there was a kind of common cliche, without being rude, but fellow crime writers, but there is like a commonality of the detective with a drink problem and a broken marriage. It's a time-old sort of saw. And I thought, I want to do something different. And I thought, what do detectives really do? They solve puzzles. More than anything else, they're solving puzzles. Why don't I create a detective, Roy Grace, and give him a personal puzzle he cannot solve? So when we meet him in Dead Simple, he's coming up to his 39th birthday. And we discover that 9 years earlier, on his 30th birthday, his wife, Sandy, who he loved and adored, vanished off the face of the earth. And for 9 years, he's looked for her without success. He functions as a homicide detective very effectively, but he can't move on in his personal life. Was she abducted? Was she murdered? Did she have a brainstorm? Will she turn up again one day? And I thought I'll set up the mystery in book 1, and I'll give the resolution book 2. And Dead Simple was published. And we were, and I mean it, inundated with readers guessing and speculating what might have happened to her. And I thought, I can have some fun with this.
Okay.
So book 2, I carried it on. And then I think it was book 3, I just thought, yes, there was the books were doing so well. We went into 38 languages. And I suddenly realized that it was a dream. It's something that I think as an author, you so much want. And I thought, wow, I have to stay with this. And I love it. I feel very lucky.
Fantastic. It's, and I remember that way back, and I can totally see the excitement of people going, and now I have to read the next book.
Let me
Yay.
tell you something else. Let me just quickly tell you something else.
Sure.
Next May, well, it might be 10 years' time in Canada, but next May, in the rest of the world, I have a standalone book come out, and it is called They Thought I Was Dead, Sandy's Story.
Yeah. Okay. So my solution to that is Lucy will buy it for me and mail it to
Brilliant.
me, and I'll get it before it comes out in Canada. I'll be the first one in Canada to have that book. Fantastic.
I think it needs a procedural eye over it, Peter, in the next week or so. I need to get an even earlier read of it, because I'm so excited about it. I think it's just going to be huge, that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to be sending it to you, Graham, very soon. I'm just waiting for the edit comments back, and then yeah, I'm really excited about it too.
It'd be amazing.
So that's interesting. So you've gone from the series, and now this is kind of a spin-off from the series. Is that what you would call it?
I guess it is a spin-off, yes, in that sense. Although it's kind of different in that the book is written from her perspective. So it's like, it kind of starts, my name is Sandy, I've just left my husband, but he doesn't know it yet.
Oh, see, and there's an opening hook. Yay.
That's incredible.
Fantastic. Well, okay, I expected a half-hour talk and we've had you for a full hour, and that is so generous. I know you must be both really busy, but it's really special, I think, for everybody here to have you here and to see how you work and think and what goes into your books. And I think one of my favorite things you said today is that you have to love the topic that you're writing about, or be interested in the topic that you're writing about, because you spend a year with your book, which shows how much time and effort goes into writing a novel. And I think often people think, oh, I'll just write a book. How hard can that be? And it's something that's really, really difficult to do well. And you've done it repeatedly. And it's really nice for others to know that it takes you a year. That's what it takes to write a really good book. And it also takes more than one person. You've got a support network around you. You mentioned your editors and Graham and your publishers and all of these things. And so that in itself is really, really nice for others to hear that, you have to put in the hard work to do it. And that's wonderful, because then you get a wonderful product. So I really want to thank you for coming. Super pleasure, both of you. I am looking forward, in Canada, to read my brand new book that came out in September. That's going to be my nighttime reading tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Are you saying Picture You Dead has literally just come out in Canada?
September 3rd.
Wow.
So I was about to say the brand new book, and then Graham said, what? That's not new. Like, well, it's new here.
Oh, that.
Okay. So that was my learning today. I have to look on all sites to see when books come out, because, mine is, Canadian.
That's so good to talk to you. That's been fun.
Yeah, really, really fun and very informative. Thank you both.
Thank everyone for your questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.